The knock came at midnight. 3 sharp raps against weathered wood that pulled Preston Zeller from his chair by the fire where he had been cleaning his Winchester rifle. He opened the door of his modest cabin on the outskirts of Fort Kearney, Nebraska Territory, to find a young woman swaying on his porch, her face pale as moonlight, her dark eyes desperate and pleading. She wore a worn cotton dress that had seen too many washings, and her brown hair hung in a disheveled braid over one shoulder. "Please," she gasped, gripping the doorframe to steady herself. "Please, I need medicine. My brother, he is burning with fever. The doctor, he would not come. He said we have no money, but Tommy is dying. I know he is dying." Preston caught her elbow as her knees buckled. "Easy now, miss. Come inside before you fall down yourself." "No," she said, though she made no move to pull away from his steadying hand. "No time, I need medicine. Willow bark. Anything for the fever. He has been sick 3 days now, and tonight he started saying things that make no sense. He thinks our mother is still alive, but she has been dead these 2 years. Preston guided her firmly but gently into his cabin. "Sit," he commanded, pushing her toward the chair he had just vacated. "You look about ready to collapse yourself. When did you last eat? This morning? Yesterday morning?" She shook her head as if trying to clear it. "I cannot remember. It does not matter." "Please, do you have anything that might help him?" Preston studied her for a moment. She could not have been more than 20 years old, with a face that would have been pretty if not drawn so tight with worry and exhaustion. Her hands trembled in her lap, and he noticed her shoes were so worn he could see her stockings through the soles. "I have some things," he said. "Willow bark tea, some herbs my mother taught me about. But miss, if your brother is as bad as you say, herbs alone might not be enough. He needs a proper doctor. Dr. Pemberton refused us." Her voice cracked. "He said we already owe him $7 from when Tommy broke his arm last winter. He will not see him again until we pay." Preston felt anger kindle in his chest. He knew Pemberton, a decent enough physician when he chose to be, but tight with his charity and tighter with his compassion. "How old is your brother?" 13. "He is all I have left in this world." She looked up at him then, and Preston saw the depth of fear in those dark eyes. "I am Lydia Kane. We live in that old soddy about 3 miles south of here, near Cottonwood Creek. Our father died in the war. Mother died of cholera 2 years back. It has been just Tommy and me since then." "Preston Zeller," he said, already moving toward the shelves where he kept his modest supply of medicines. "Miss Kane, I will get my things together and ride back with you. I want to see your brother myself." "You would do that?" Hope flickered across her face, so bright and sudden it made his chest ache. "I would. But first, you are going to drink some water and eat something. You will be no good to your brother if you faint off your horse on the way home." He poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and handed it to her, then cut a thick slice of bread and smeared it with butter. "Eat that while I saddle my horse and gather supplies." Lydia took the bread with shaking hands. "I do not know how to thank you. I do not know how we will ever repay you. We will worry about that later." Preston was already pulling on his coat and hat. "Right now, let us focus on getting your brother through this fever." 20 minutes later, they were riding through the Nebraska night, Lydia on her ancient mare and Preston on his bay gelding, Thunder. She had protested when he filled a saddlebag with not just medicines, but also salted meat, beans, and a precious packet of white sugar. "You do not have to," she had said. "I know I do not have to. I am choosing to." His tone had brooked no argument. Now they rode in silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the whisper of wind through prairie grass. The moon hung fat and yellow in the sky, illuminating their path. Preston kept glancing at Lydia, noting how she swayed slightly in her saddle. She was exhausted, That much was clear, and probably had been running herself ragged caring for her sick brother. "How long have you and your brother been on your own?" he asked, partly to keep her alert, partly because he found himself genuinely curious. "2 years, like I said, since Mama died." Lydia's voice was quiet. "We manage. I do washing and mending for some of the families in town. Tommy traps rabbits and prairie chickens. We have a small garden. It is not much, but it is ours, and we are free." "Free," Preston repeated. "That is worth something." "Everything," she said. "We could have gone to an orphanage in Omaha, but they would have separated us. Tommy is my responsibility. I promised Mama I would keep us together." Preston heard the fierce determination beneath her exhaustion. "You are doing a fine job," he said. "Taking care of a farm and a young boy on your own, that is no small thing. I have failed him now, though. I let him get this sick. I should have noticed sooner, should have done something. Fevers come on quick sometimes. It might not be anything you could have prevented." Preston spoke with more confidence than he felt. Truth was, he did not know what they would find when they reached the Kane homestead. The boy could already be past helping. They reached the soddy as the moon began its descent toward the western horizon. It was a small structure, built partially underground with walls of stacked prairie sod and a roof of the same, with a few wooden supports visible. A thin trail of smoke rose from a tin chimney pipe. Lamplight glowed faintly through one small window. Lydia dismounted before her horse had fully stopped, stumbling in her haste. Preston caught her arm again, steadying her. "Easy. You will be no use to him if you break your ankle in the dark." She nodded, taking a shaky breath, then led him toward the door. Inside, the soddy was surprisingly tidy despite its poverty. A small stove in one corner, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves made from scrap lumber holding a few dishes and supplies. 2 narrow beds occupied the far wall, and in one of them lay a boy who appeared far too still. Preston moved quickly to the bedside. The boy, Tommy, was indeed burning with fever, his face flushed and his breathing shallow and rapid. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, and even in sleep he moved restlessly, muttering words that made no sense. "How long has he been like this?" Preston asked, already reaching for the medicine bag he had slung over his shoulder. "He has been fevered for 3 days, but he got really bad this evening. That is when I went for help." Lydia was wringing her hands, standing helplessly by the bed. "He stopped making sense around sundown. Kept calling for Mama, talking about going fishing with Papa." Preston pressed his hand to the boy's forehead, then checked his pulse. It was racing, thready beneath his fingers. "I need you to build up that fire and get water boiling. We are going to make a tea with willow bark and some other herbs. We also need cool water and cloths to bring down this fever." Lydia moved immediately, grateful to have something to do. Preston continued his examination, noting the flush that spread down Tommy's neck, the dry heat of his skin. He pulled back the thin blanket and checked the boy's arms and torso. No rash, at least. That ruled out some of the worst possibilities. "Does he have any pain anywhere? His belly, his head, anywhere specific?" Preston asked. "He said his throat hurt yesterday, and his head." Lydia was pumping water into a basin, her movements quick and efficient despite her exhaustion. Preston gently tilted Tommy's head back and tried to look at his throat. It was angry and red, swollen. "Throat infection," he said. "Bad one from the looks of it. The fever is his body trying to fight it off. Will he be all right?" Lydia's voice was barely above a whisper. Preston met her eyes. He could have lied, could have offered false comfort, but he sensed she would see through it and respect the truth more. "I do not know," he said honestly. "The fever is high and he is already weakened. But he is young and that works in his favor. We are going to do everything we can." For the next several hours, they worked in tandem. Preston brewed his willow bark tea and got some down Tommy's throat, though the boy barely roused. They bathed his face and arms with cool water, trying to bring down the fever. Preston mixed a poultice of herbs and had Lydia help him apply it to the boy's throat and chest. As dawn began to gray the eastern sky, Tommy's fever broke slightly. He was still too hot, still too sick, but the change was noticeable. His breathing came a little easier and he stopped the constant restless muttering. Preston sat back in the chair he had pulled to the bedside, rubbing his face wearily. "That is a good sign," he said. "The fever is still high, but it has come down some. We need to keep giving him the tea, keep him cool, and watch him close. The next day or two will tell the tale." Lydia was standing by the small stove, and she turned to look at him. In the growing light, Preston could see tear tracks on her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for coming. If you had turned me away like the doctor did, I think Tommy would have died tonight. I am glad I could help." Preston stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sitting. "I should let you rest. You look dead on your feet. I will come back later today to check on him." "You do not have to do that. You have already done so much. Miss Kane, your brother is not out of danger yet. He needs watching for at least another day or two. You need sleep or you will collapse." Preston spoke firmly. "I will come back at midday. In the meantime, try to get some rest yourself. If his fever spikes again or he takes a turn for the worse, you come get me straight away." Lydia nodded, too tired to argue. As Preston moved toward the door, she reached out and caught his sleeve. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you helping us? You do not know us. We cannot pay you." Preston looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. In the pale dawn light, he could see the fine lines worry had carved around her eyes, but he could also see the strength in her features, the determined set of her jaw. Something stirred in his chest, unfamiliar and unsettling. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because I have the means to help and you needed it. A man who would not help in those circumstances is no kind of man at all." He rode back to his cabin as the sun rose over the prairie, painting the grass gold and amber. Preston had moved to Fort Kearney 6 months ago, taking work as a ranch hand for one of the larger spreads while he saved money to start his own place. He kept to himself mostly, still carrying the weight of things he had seen during his years as a cavalry scout. The quiet life suited him, and he had not planned on getting involved with anyone or anything beyond his work. Yet he could not stop thinking about Lydia Kane and her sick brother in that soddy by Cottonwood Creek. Could not stop seeing the desperate hope in her eyes when he had agreed to help, or the fierce protectiveness in her voice when she spoke of keeping her brother safe. He tended to his own animals, grabbed a few hours of sleep, then packed fresh supplies and rode back to the Kane place. It was just past noon when he arrived, and he found Lydia outside, hanging washing on a line strung between 2 posts. She looked up as he approached, and he noticed she had changed her dress and fixed her hair, though shadows still darkened the skin beneath her eyes. "How is he?" Preston asked, dismounting. "Better, I think. His fever is still high, but he woke for a little while and knew me. He even drank some broth." The relief in her voice was palpable. You should have seen his eyes when he realized where he was. "He has been so far away these past days, lost in the fever, but this morning he looked at me and said my name clear as day. That is very good news." Preston felt his own relief, surprising in its intensity. "I would like to check on him if that is all right. Of course. Please come in." Tommy was awake when they entered, propped up on thin pillows, looking impossibly young and fragile. His eyes widened when he saw Preston. "Who is that?" he asked Lydia, his voice raspy. "This is Mr. Zeller. He is the man who brought medicine to help you." Lydia moved to sit on the edge of the bed, smoothing her brother's hair back from his forehead. "You have been very sick, Tommy. Mr. Zeller came in the middle of the night to help." Tommy looked at Preston with solemn, fever-bright eyes. "Thank you, sir," he said, the words coming out rough and painful sounding. "You are welcome, son." Preston approached the bed and knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. "Your sister tells me you are feeling a bit better. How is that throat?" "Hurts like anything," Tommy admitted. "And I feel weak as a kitten." "That is to be expected. You have been very sick, but I think you are on the mend now." Preston checked the boy's forehead, pleased to find it cooler than it had been in the night. "You keep resting. Keep drinking that tea your sister makes even though it tastes terrible, and you should be back to your old self in a week or so." "I will do whatever you say, sir." Preston spent the afternoon at the Kane homestead, ostensibly to monitor Tommy's condition, though the boy continued to improve steadily. In truth, he found himself reluctant to leave. He helped Lydia with some of the heavier chores, chopping wood for the stove and hauling water from the creek. She protested at first, but he waved her objections away. "You have been up for nearly 2 days straight by my count. Let me do this." As he worked, he noticed how run down the place was. The soddy itself was sound enough, but there were 100 small repairs that needed doing. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Several of the support beams looked questionable. The small chicken coop by the side of the house was missing boards, and he could see where some predator had tried to dig underneath. When he came back inside with an armload of wood, he found Lydia at the stove, stirring something in a pot. The smell of cooking beans filled the small space. She glanced at him, then quickly away, a flush rising in her cheeks. "You must think we are pathetic," she said quietly. "Living like this, barely scraping by." "I think no such thing." Preston stacked the wood neatly by the stove. "I think you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. Taking care of a homestead and a young brother entirely on your own, that takes courage and grit most folks do not have." "It does not feel like courage. Most days it just feels like surviving." "Sometimes that is the same thing." Preston watched her stir the beans, noting the graceful economy of her movements. "How old were you when your parents died?" 17 when Papa died at Shiloh. 18 when Mama took sick with cholera." She kept her eyes on the pot. "I had to grow up fast." "Too fast," Preston said. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. "You speak as though you understand." "My own parents died when I was 16. Farm accident back in Missouri. I have been on my own since then, more or less. Had to learn to take care of myself young, same as you." "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" "No. I was an only child." Preston moved to check on Tommy, who had fallen back asleep, his breathing slow and even. "Looks like he is resting easy." "Thanks to you." Lydia set down her spoon and turned to face him. In the dim light of the soddy, with her face still shadowed by exhaustion but softened by relief, Preston thought she was beautiful. The thought caught him off guard, and he looked away quickly. "I should head back," he said, though he made no move toward the door. "But I will come by tomorrow to check on him again. Make sure the fever does not come back. You have already done so much. You do not need to keep riding all the way out here." "I want to." The words came out more forcefully than he intended. "I mean, I want to make sure the boy is truly on the mend. These things can take a turn for the worse quickly." Lydia studied him for a long moment. "All right," she said finally. "Tomorrow, then." Preston visited every day for the next week. At first, his excuse was checking on Tommy, who continued to improve steadily. The boy's fever broke completely on the 3rd day, and by the end of the week, he was sitting up, eating solid food and complaining about being kept in bed. But even after Tommy was clearly out of danger, Preston kept coming. He told himself it was because there was work that needed doing. He fixed the door, reinforced the roof supports, repaired the chicken coop. He brought lumber salvaged from a collapsed barn on the property where he worked, and used it to build proper shelves and make other improvements. The ranch foreman, a fair man named Bill Henderson, did not mind when Preston took scrap materials that would otherwise have been burned. But deep down, Preston knew the real reason he kept riding out to the Kane place. It was Lydia. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments during the day. The way she laughed at something Tommy said, her whole face lighting up. The stubborn set of her jaw when she was determined about something. The gentle way she tended her small garden, coaxing life from the harsh prairie soil. And Lydia, for her part, seemed to welcome his presence. She stopped protesting when he showed up with tools and supplies. She began having coffee ready when he arrived, strong and hot the way he liked it. She asked about his work on the ranch, about his life before he came to Nebraska Territory. They talked while he worked, and she went about her own chores, conversations that ranged from the practical to the personal. "Why did you come to Nebraska?" she asked him one afternoon. He was replacing boards on the side of the soddy while she weeded her vegetable garden nearby. "Wanted a fresh start," he said, which was true as far as it went. "I did some scouting for the cavalry during the war years, and after that, I just wanted someplace quiet. A friend told me about Fort Kearney, said there was work to be had and land for the taking if a man was willing to work for it." "You miss Missouri?" Preston thought about it. "Sometimes. But there was nothing left for me there. All the people I knew were dead or scattered. The land itself, sure, I miss that sometimes. The big trees, the way everything was so green, but Nebraska has its own beauty." "I have never been anywhere else," Lydia admitted. "I was born in Ohio, but we came here when I was just a baby. This is all I have ever known." "You want to see other places?" She was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling in the dirt. "Sometimes I dream about it, seeing a real city with tall buildings and theaters and shops. But then I wake up and there is wood to chop and washing to do and Tommy to feed, and dreams do not really matter much." "They matter," Preston said. "Dreams are what keep us going." One evening, as he was preparing to ride back to his cabin, Lydia stopped him at the door. "Stay for supper," she said. "It is not much, just beans and cornbread, but it is the least I can do after everything you have done for us." Preston hesitated. Sharing a meal felt more intimate somehow than all the hours of work and conversation. It felt like crossing a line he had been carefully avoiding, but Lydia was looking at him with those dark eyes, and he found he could not say no. "I would be honored," he said. They ate at the small wooden table, Tommy chattering happily about the rabbit he had caught that morning, how he had reset all his traps and was feeling almost back to normal. Lydia served the food on mismatched plates, apologizing for the plainness of the meal. Preston told her it was the best cornbread he had ever tasted, which was not entirely a lie. After supper, Tommy excused himself, saying he was tired. Preston suspected the boy was being diplomatic, giving them time alone. The thought made his pulse quicken. "Walk with me?" Lydia asked. "Just for a bit. I want to show you something." They walked away from the soddy, out across the prairie as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. The wind whispered through the grass, and overhead the first stars were beginning to appear. Lydia led him to a small rise overlooking Cottonwood Creek. Below, the water sparkled in the fading light. "This is my favorite spot," she said. "When things get hard, when I feel like I cannot manage another day, I come here. It helps me remember why we stay, why we fight so hard to hold onto this place." "It is beautiful," Preston said, and he meant it. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, grass rippling like an ocean under the wind. The sky was vast and open, painted in shades of flame and rose. "Sometimes I feel so small here," Lydia said quietly, "like I could just disappear and the prairie would swallow me up and no one would ever know I existed. I would know." The words were out before Preston could think better of them. "I would miss you." She turned to look at him, and in the twilight her eyes were very dark and very deep. "Preston," she said, and it was the first time she had used his given name. "Why do you keep coming here? Tommy is well now. There is no reason for you to keep riding all this way." "I come because I want to see you." He forced himself to meet her gaze, to be honest. "Because these past weeks, getting to know you and Tommy, have been the happiest I have been in a very long time. Because when I am not here, I am thinking about when I can come back." Lydia drew in a shaky breath. "I have been hoping you would say something like that. I have been hoping, but I did not dare believe. Why would a man like you be interested in someone like me?" "Someone like you." Preston took a step closer. "Lydia, you are one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. You are strong and brave and kind. You have built a life here against all odds. You have protected your brother and kept your family together when most people would have given up. How could I not be interested in you?" "I have nothing," she whispered. "No money, no prospects, just a failing farm and a brother to raise. You have everything that matters." Preston reached out and took her hand, rough and calloused from work, so much smaller than his own. "These past weeks, I have been falling in love with you." "I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish that I should stay away, but I cannot." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I have been falling in love with you too. I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone. There has not been time, has not been space in my life for such things. But then you appeared at midnight when I needed you most, and you have kept appearing every day since, and I cannot imagine my life now without you in it." Preston cupped her face in his hands, wiping away tears with his thumbs. "Then let me be in it. Let me help you and Tommy. Let me court you properly, the way you deserve." "Properly?" She laughed through her tears. "Preston, you have already been courting me. Every board you hammered, every bucket of water you hauled, every moment you have spent here, that has been courting me. Then let me ask you this properly." He took a breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Lydia Kane, may I have permission to court you, to come calling with the intention of eventual marriage?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Preston Zeller, you may." He kissed her then, soft and gentle. There on the rise above Cottonwood Creek, with the last light fading from the sky and the first stars burning overhead. Her lips were warm and soft beneath his, and when she slid her arms around his neck, pressing close, he felt something settle into place in his chest. Something that had been restless and searching for as long as he could remember. They walked back to the soddy hand in hand, and Preston felt like he was floating. Tommy was sitting on the front step, whittling a piece of wood, and he looked up as they approached. His eyes went to their joined hands and a grin split his face. "About time," the boy said. "I was wondering if I was going to have to lock you two in the chicken coop to get you to say something to each other." "Tommy," Lydia's face flamed red, but she was laughing. "What?" It was obvious to anyone with eyes that you two were sweet on each other. Tommy stood up, suddenly serious. "Mr. Zeller, you are going to look after my sister, right? You are not going to break her heart." Preston met the boy's eyes, seeing the protectiveness there, the worry. "I am going to take care of her," he said seriously. "And you too, if you will let me. I am not going anywhere." Tommy studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. Welcome to the family, I guess." "Tommy, we are not married yet," Lydia protested. "But you will be," Tommy said with the absolute certainty of youth. "Anybody can see that." Preston courted Lydia through the late summer and into fall. He continued to work at the ranch, but every free moment he had, he was at the Kane place. He helped bring in their small harvest of corn and squash. He taught Tommy to shoot properly, a skill the boy would need to help feed them through the winter. He sat with Lydia in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying her presence in companionable silence. They were proper in their courtship, always mindful of appearances and Tommy's presence. But there were stolen moments. Kisses in the barn while Tommy was out checking his traps. Hands brushing as they worked side by side. Looks that said more than words ever could. Preston had never been happier. The war and the hard years that followed seemed to fade, becoming just memories rather than the ever-present ghosts they had been. He found himself making plans for the future, something he had not done in years. He saved every penny he earned, adding it to the stake he had already accumulated. He talked to Bill Henderson about buying some of the ranch's less productive land, a section that bordered the Kane homestead. "You are serious about that girl," Henderson said. "It was not a question." "I am going to marry her," Preston said. "Soon as I have enough saved to feel like I am not just another burden on her." Henderson nodded approvingly. "She is a good woman from what I hear. Works hard, takes care of her brother. You could do a lot worse. Tell you what, I will give you a good price on that land. Consider it a wedding present." As autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and russet, Preston began building a house on his new land. It was not large, just 4 rooms, but it was solid and well made. Tommy helped, eager to learn carpentry skills, and even Lydia lent a hand when she could spare time from her own work. "This is really happening," she said one afternoon, standing in what would be the main room, looking around at the framed walls and the rough floorboards. "We are really going to have a real house, not just a soddy." "We are." Preston came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on top of her head. "I want you to be comfortable. I want to give you the life you deserve." "I have everything I need already," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "I have you. The rest is just details. Important details." He kissed her forehead. "I want our children to grow up in a real house. I want them to have what you and Tommy did not have: security, comfort." "Our children," she repeated softly, her eyes shining. "I like the sound of that. So do I." Preston pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "Marry me, Lydia. I know we have been courting only a few months, but I do not see the point in waiting. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Marry me." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you. Today, tomorrow, whenever you want." They were married 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning in 1867. The ceremony took place at the small church in Fort Kearney, with Tommy standing as witness and Bill Henderson and his wife attending as well. Lydia wore a simple dress of blue cotton that Preston had bought for her at the general store, along with new shoes that actually fit and a white ribbon for her hair. The preacher was an old circuit rider named Reverend Matthews, who had seen enough of life on the frontier to appreciate what he was witnessing. "You two have found something rare," he said as he pronounced them man and wife. "Hold tight to it, treasure it. And remember that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day." Preston kissed his bride there in the tiny church, and he felt joy so intense it was almost painful. This woman, this strong, brave, beautiful woman, was his now. He was hers. They would face whatever came together. They held a small celebration at Bill Henderson's ranch house afterward. Henderson's wife, Martha, had prepared a feast by frontier standards: roasted chicken, fresh bread, apple pie made from the last of the fall apples. There were about a dozen people there, ranch hands and neighbors who had heard about the wedding and wanted to wish them well. Tommy ate until he looked like he might burst, his face shining with happiness. "I gained a brother today," he announced to anyone who would listen. A real brother, not just by blood but by choice. Preston felt his throat tighten. That you did, Tommy, that you did. As evening fell, Preston drove his new bride and her brother to the house he had built. It was finished now, at least enough to live in. There was glass in the windows, a real door with a working lock, a stove in the kitchen, and a fireplace in the main room. The furniture was mostly rough-made, but Preston had bought a proper bed frame and mattress as a surprise for Lydia. "Oh, Preston," she breathed when she saw it. "You should not have spent the money." "I absolutely should have." He pulled her close, acutely aware of Tommy tactfully disappearing into the smaller bedroom that would be his. "You are my wife now. I want you to have nice things." That night, lying in their new bed in their new house with his wife in his arms, Preston felt peace settle over him like a benediction. He had been alone for so long, adrift and purposeless. But Lydia had given him something to care about beyond mere survival. She had given him a future. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," she murmured back, her hand resting over his heart. "You already are." Their first winter as a married couple was hard but good. Money was tight, and the weather turned bitter, but they faced it together. Preston continued his work at the ranch while also tending their own small spread. Lydia kept house and managed their supplies with a skill born of years of making do with little. Tommy threw himself into his role as man of the house, hunting and trapping, bringing in rabbits and prairie chickens to supplement their meals. They celebrated Christmas with a small tree Tommy cut from the cottonwoods along the creek, decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Lydia made. Preston had saved enough to buy Tommy a new hunting knife and Lydia a length of green calico for a new dress. Lydia had knitted them each warm scarves, working on them by lamplight after the men had gone to bed. It was not a grand celebration, but it was warm and full of love, and that was worth more than all the store-bought presents in the world. In February, Lydia told Preston she was expecting a child. He had suspected as much, noting the way she had been tired in the mornings, the way she sometimes pressed her hand to her stomach with a small, secret smile. Still, hearing the words made his heart stutter. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She looked up at him anxiously. "I know it is happening quickly. We have only been married a few months." "Happy?" Preston swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "Lydia, I am beyond happy. I am overjoyed." "Terrified but overjoyed." "Terrified," she laughed. "Why terrified?" "Because I am going to be a father. What if I am no good at it? What if I make mistakes? Then you will make them, and we will figure it out together." She took his hands, pressing them to her still flat stomach. "This baby will be so loved, Preston. That is what matters most." Tommy's reaction was equally enthusiastic. "I am going to be an uncle," he crowed. "Wait until I tell the boys at school, an uncle at 14. That is something." As spring turned to summer, Preston worked harder than ever. He expanded their garden, built a proper barn, bought 2 milk cows and more chickens. He was determined that his child would be born into a home of plenty, not the poverty Lydia had known for so long. But despite his efforts, money remained tight. Medical care cost money, and Dr. Pemberton, despite his refusal to help Tommy the previous year, was the only physician within 50 miles. Preston swallowed his pride and went to see the man in July, when Lydia was about 6 months along. "I want you to attend my wife when her time comes," he said without preamble. Pemberton looked up from the ledger he had been writing in. He was a thin man with graying hair and a perpetually sour expression. "Mr. Zeller, I heard you married the Kane girl." "Taking on another man's burden, are you?" Preston felt his jaw tighten. I am taking care of my family. Will you attend her or not? That depends. Do you have money to pay me? Because your wife has a history of not paying her debts. She was 18 years old and alone, trying to care for a sick brother. Preston fought to keep his voice level. I have money. I will pay you what is owed from before, and I will pay for your services when the baby comes. Cash up front. Half now, half when the baby is safely delivered. Pemberton considered this. Fine, but if you cannot pay, I will not help. I have been too lenient in the past, and it has cost me. Preston paid the man half of what he was owed, feeling each dollar like a wound, but it was worth it. Lydia's health and the baby's were worth any price. As summer blazed hot across the prairie, Lydia grew round with child. She moved more slowly now, one hand often pressed to the small of her back. Preston hovered, worrying, until she finally told him to stop, or she would lose her mind. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she said, exasperated but fond. I will be fine. I know, but I cannot help worrying. Then worry quietly. But she smiled as she said it, and he knew she appreciated his concern even if she found it excessive. The baby came in late August, on a stifling hot night when the air was thick as wool. Lydia's pain started just after supper, and Preston immediately sent Tommy racing to town to fetch Dr. Pemberton. Then he did the only thing he could do, which was to stay by his wife's side and hold her hand and try not to panic. I am scared, Lydia admitted between contractions, her face pale and sheened with sweat. I know. I am too, but you are the strongest person I know. You can do this. Do not leave me. Never. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I am right here. I am not going anywhere. Pemberton arrived an hour later, looking disgruntled at being roused from his bed, but he was professional enough once he saw Lydia's condition. He examined her, then said, It will be several hours yet. First babies take their time. Those hours were the longest of Preston's life. He stayed by Lydia's side, wiping her face with cool water, letting her grip his hand so hard he thought the bones might break. Tommy waited outside, too nervous to stay in the room but too worried to go far. Just before dawn, after what felt like an eternity, a baby's cry split the air. Preston felt his knees go weak with relief. A boy, Pemberton announced, placing the squalling infant on Lydia's chest. A healthy boy. Preston looked down at his son, red-faced and furious at being thrust into the world, and felt love so fierce it stole his breath. He is perfect, he whispered. He is, Lydia agreed, tears streaming down her face. She looked exhausted but radiant. Our son. Preston, we have a son. They named him William Thomas, after Preston's father and in acknowledgment of Tommy. Little Will, as they called him, was a good baby, healthy and strong lunged. He had his mother's dark eyes and his father's strong features, and Preston thought he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Life settled into a new rhythm. Preston still worked at the Henderson ranch, but now he came home each evening to a wife and son who needed him. Lydia bloomed in motherhood, despite the exhaustion that came with caring for an infant. Tommy was a devoted uncle, always eager to hold the baby or help in whatever way he could. As Will grew from infant to toddler, the little family prospered. The ranch did well, and Preston received a raise in his wages. They bought more land, expanded their herd. Tommy, now a young man of 17, proved invaluable, working the land with a dedication that would have made their parents proud. One evening in spring, when Will was about 2 years old, Preston found Lydia standing in the doorway of their house, looking out over their land. The sun was setting, painting everything gold, and in the distance he could see their cattle grazing, Tommy checking fences, their son playing with a wooden horse Preston had carved. "What are you thinking about?" Preston asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About how far we have come," she said softly. "4 years ago I was knocking on your door in the middle of the night, desperate and alone, sure that I was going to lose everything that mattered. And now look at us. We have a home, a family, a life. It seems almost like a dream." "It is real," Preston assured her. "We built this together. You and me and Tommy. We took what little we had and we made something beautiful from it." "That night," Lydia said, turning in his arms to face him. "That night when I knocked on your door, it was the most terrifying moment of my life. But it was also the moment everything changed. You could have turned me away. You had every right to, but you did not. You rode out into the night to save a boy you did not know, and in doing so, you saved me too." Preston cupped her face in his hands, looking into those dark eyes he loved so well. "You saved me right back," he said. "I was just existing before I met you, going through the motions of life but not really living. You gave me a reason to want more, to be more. I love you, Preston Zeller. I love you too, Lydia Zeller, more than I have words to say." They kissed there in the doorway as the sun set, and their son played nearby, and Tommy finished his work in the fields. It was an ordinary moment, one of thousands they would share over the years. But it was also extraordinary in its simple perfection. That night, after Will was asleep and Tommy had gone to bed in the cabin they had built for him behind the main house, Lydia told Preston she was expecting another child. He swept her up carefully, joy lighting his face. "Another one," he marveled. "How many do you want?" "As many as we can manage," she said, laughing. "I always wanted a big family. I hated being alone, having only Tommy. I want our children to grow up surrounded by brothers and sisters." "Then that is what we will have," Preston promised. Their second child, a daughter they named Anna Rose, arrived that December, a month before Christmas. She was smaller than Will had been, more delicate, with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. Where Will had been a vocal baby, Anna was quiet and watchful, studying the world with solemn interest. Will, now 3, was fascinated by his little sister. He wanted to be involved in everything, from changing her nappies to feeding her mashed vegetables. Preston and Lydia watched their children together, marveling at the family they had created. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named James Henry. He was the largest of their babies, strong and healthy from the start. Will and Anna both doted on their little brother, and the house rang with children's laughter and occasional squabbles. Tommy married when he was 21, a sweet girl named Sarah from Fort Kearney, whose father owned the mercantile. The wedding was held at the church, and afterward there was a celebration at the Zeller home. Preston watched his brother-in-law dance with his new bride and felt proud of the man Tommy had become. "He has done well for himself," Lydia said, leaning against Preston's shoulder as they watched. "He had a good example," Preston said. "You raised him right, Lydia. Despite everything you went through, you kept him safe and helped him grow into a good man." "We both did," she corrected. "You were as much a father to him as I was a mother." Tommy and Sarah built a house on the far edge of the Zeller property, and Tommy continued to work the land alongside Preston. The two families grew close, and when Tommy and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Peter, Will and Anna were thrilled to have a cousin to play with. The years flowed past like water. Preston expanded their cattle operation, eventually buying the Henderson Ranch when Bill retired and moved to Omaha to live with his daughter. The Zeller Ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. But despite their prosperity, Preston and Lydia never forgot the hard times. They were generous with their neighbors, always ready to help someone in need. When drought struck the region one terrible summer, they opened their wells to anyone who needed water. When a neighboring family's barn burned down, Preston organized the men to help rebuild it. "You are thinking about that night," Lydia said once, finding Preston standing on their porch, looking out over the land. Their children were grown now, with families of their own. Will ran the ranch alongside his father. Anna had married a lawyer in Fort Kearney and lived in town. James had gone east for schooling and returned with a degree in agriculture, full of new ideas for improving their operations. "What night?" Preston asked, though he knew. "The night I knocked on your door. You get this look sometimes, like you are remembering." Preston pulled her close, this woman he had loved for over 20 years now. Her hair was threaded with silver, and lines crinkled around her eyes when she smiled, but to him she was as beautiful as the desperate girl who had appeared on his doorstep seeking help. "I was just thinking how one moment can change everything," he said. "If I had not been home that night, if I had been out checking the herd or asleep too soundly to hear your knock, if I had turned you away, our whole lives would be different. But you were home," Lydia said. "You heard me. You helped. You always help, Preston. It is who you are." "I am who I am because of you," he countered. "You taught me what it means to truly love someone, not just the grand gestures, but the everyday choice to show up, to be present, to work together toward a common goal." "We taught each other," Lydia said. "That is what marriage is, I think. Two people teaching each other how to be better than they ever could have been alone." They stood together in the fading light, watching their grandson, Will's eldest son, drive a small herd of cattle toward the near pasture. The boy was only 10, but he already had the makings of a fine cattleman, sitting his horse with confidence and moving the animals with skill beyond his years. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked quietly. "Marrying me, I mean. You were so young. You could have had a different life." "Never," Lydia said fiercely. "Not for one single moment. You gave me everything I ever wanted and so much I did not even know to dream about. You gave me love and security and a family. You gave me yourself, and that was the greatest gift of all." Preston kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I feel the same. That night you knocked on my door was the night my real life began." On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. There was a feast laid out on long tables, and someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing under the stars. Tommy, now in his late 30s with 4 children of his own, stood up to make a toast. "25 years ago," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "my sister knocked on the door of a man she had never met, begging for help to save my life. Preston Zeller could have turned her away. He could have given her some medicine and sent her on her way. Instead, he rode out in the middle of the night and saved us both, not just from sickness, but from the poverty and loneliness that would have surely destroyed us eventually. He gave us a family. He gave us hope. He gave us a future." Tommy raised his glass. "To Preston and Lydia. May they have many more happy years together." "To Preston and Lydia," the crowd echoed, and Preston felt his throat tighten with emotion. Later, as the party wound down and their children and grandchildren began to drift toward home, Preston and Lydia walked out to the rise above Cottonwood Creek, the place where he had first told her he loved her all those years ago. The creek still sparkled in the moonlight. The prairie still stretched endlessly in all directions, but so much had changed since that night. "Remember standing here, wondering if you were too small to matter?" Preston asked. "If the prairie would swallow you up and no one would know you existed?" "I remember," Lydia said. "Look at what you have done." Preston gestured back toward their house, glowing with lamplight, toward the barns and corrals and fields. "Look at the family we have created, the life we have built. You matter, Lydia. You have always mattered, and you always will." She leaned into him, and they stood there in comfortable silence, two people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. They had weathered so much together: hard winters and dry summers, the death of friends and the births of grandchildren, disagreements and reconciliations. Through it all, their love had remained constant, the foundation on which everything else was built. "You remember what Reverend Matthews said at our wedding?" Lydia asked. "That love is not just a feeling but a choice we make every day." "I remember." "I have chosen you every day for 25 years, she said. "And I would choose you every day for 25 more, for 50 more, for however many years God grants us." "And I would choose you," Preston said. "Every single time, in every possible world, I would always choose you." They kissed there under the stars, and Preston felt the same spark he had felt all those years ago. Time had weathered them, shaped them, but it had not diminished what they felt for each other. If anything, their love had grown stronger, deepened by shared experience and tested by hardship. The years continued to pass. Preston and Lydia grew old together, watching their children raise families of their own. Will took over full operation of the ranch, proving himself a capable manager. Anna's husband became mayor of Fort Kearney, and she was instrumental in establishing the town's first proper school. James revolutionized their cattle breeding program, producing some of the finest stock in Nebraska. Tommy remained Preston's right hand until age forced them both to slow down. The two men, who had started as strangers brought together by crisis, had become true brothers, bonded by love and respect and decades of shared labor. When Preston was 68, he suffered a bad fall from a horse, breaking several ribs and injuring his back. The doctor, a young man named Roberts who had taken over Pemberton's practice when the old physician died, warned him to take it easy. "You are not a young man anymore, Mr. Zeller. You need to rest, let your body heal." But Preston was a restless patient. He hated being confined to bed, hated feeling useless. Lydia sat with him for hours, reading to him from the newspapers and novels their daughter brought from town, playing checkers, just talking. Her presence soothed him in a way nothing else could. "I do not know how to be idle," he confessed one afternoon. "I have been working since I was old enough to hold a rake. I do not know how to just sit." "Then learn," Lydia said practically. "You have earned a rest, Preston. You have worked yourself near to death for 40 years. Let someone else do the heavy labor now. I feel like I am giving up." "You are not giving up. You are acknowledging that you are human with human limitations." She took his hand, her own hands as work-worn and calloused as his. "We are old, Preston. There is no shame in that. We have lived full lives. We have raised our children and helped raise our grandchildren. We have built something that will last beyond us. Now we get to rest and enjoy what we have created." Preston healed, though he was never quite as strong as he had been. He walked with a cane now, and his back ached on cold days. But he found that Lydia had been right. There was pleasure in sitting on the porch and watching his grandchildren play. There was satisfaction in offering advice to Will rather than doing all the work himself. There was joy in having time to simply be with his wife, without the constant press of labor. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered again. There were so many now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house and yard were full to overflowing with people who shared their blood, who existed because of the choice they had made to love each other all those years ago. "Look at this," Lydia marveled, standing in the doorway and surveying the crowd. "Look at what we made." "You made it," Preston said. "You are the heart of this family, Lydia, always have been." "We made it together," she corrected, as she always did. That evening, as the party continued around them, Preston asked Lydia to dance. His back protested and his knees ached, but he would not have missed it for the world. They swayed together in the twilight, moving slowly to the music of fiddle and guitar, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "I love you," Preston said, the words as easy now as breathing. "I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you for 40 more if we are blessed to have them." "I love you too," Lydia said. "My cowboy, my hero, my husband, my home." As the stars came out and the music played and their family celebrated around them, Preston held his wife close and thought about the night she had knocked on his door, desperate and afraid, seeking medicine for her dying brother. He thought about how he had ridden out into the darkness, not knowing that he was riding toward his future, toward love and family and a life richer than he had ever imagined possible. One knock on the door, one choice to help, and it had changed everything. Years later, when Preston was 76 and Lydia 74, they sat together on the porch of the house he had built for her so long ago. It had been expanded and improved over the decades, but the bones of it were the same. Preston's hands shook slightly with age now, and Lydia's eyesight was failing, but they were still together, still choosing each other every day. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Lydia asked. "What is that?" "I think about all the people I could have knocked on that night." There were 3 other cabins between town and Arsati, but something drew me to your door. Fate, luck, God's hand, whatever you want to call it. Something led me to you. "I am grateful it did," Preston said. "So am I. Every day I am grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the sun set over the prairie they had called home for so long. In the distance, they could see Will and his eldest son working with horses in the corral. Closer by, one of Anna's grandchildren was picking wildflowers, weaving them into a crown. "We have had a good life," Preston said. "The best life," Lydia agreed. Preston Zeller died peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 78 with Lydia holding his hand. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Nebraska. People came from miles around to pay respects to a man who had been known for his fairness, his generosity, and his devotion to his family. Lydia grieved, but not as one without hope. She knew she had been blessed beyond measure. She had loved and been loved in return. She had raised children who became good people, who were raising good people of their own. She had lived to see her family flourish and thrive. She continued to live in the house Preston had built, cared for by her children and surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories of the old days, of the frontier, of their grandfather who had saved her and her brother all those years ago. "He was the best man I ever knew," she would say. "Strong and kind and true. When I needed help most, when I was at my lowest and most desperate, he appeared like an answer to prayer. And he kept appearing every day for 51 years. That is what love is, children. Not just feeling something, but choosing to show up, day after day, through good times and hard times alike." Lydia Kane Zeller died in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Preston had created. She was buried next to her husband on the rise above Cottonwood Creek, the place where they had first confessed their love for each other. Their descendants continued to work the land they had built together, carrying on the legacy of hard work and integrity Preston and Lydia had established. The story of how they met, that desperate midnight knock and the cowboy who rode out to save a dying boy and found love in the process, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, because it was a story worth remembering. A story of how one moment of kindness, one choice to help someone in need, can ripple out across decades and generations. How love can take root in the most desperate circumstances and grow into something beautiful and lasting. How 2 people who had every reason to remain strangers instead chose to build a life together that would echo far beyond their own years. It was a love story, pure and simple. The best kind of love story, the kind that lasts forever.